Yeah, my name is Osama Dorias, and this is a talk about how to make games with your kids. You're free to make games with other people's kids, but ask permission first, please. This is not a talk for kids, but I'm really happy to see kids here. Why not, right? I almost brought mine. So who am I? A little bit about myself. This is me in cartoon form. And I have a small indie company that I run called Magic Pants. We only have one title out so far that we're working on called Heroes Never Lose on Steam, and we're working on other projects on the side as well, little prototypes that we're going to develop into making them into real games. Heroes Never Lose is kind of like an action puzzler. I'm also a senior game designer at Minority Media. This actually takes up the bulk of my time. This is a recent venture. I started about 3 months ago, and we're about to ship the first game that I worked on soon. We waste no time at Minority. And I'm also the coordinator of the video game programs at Dawson College. I authored the world's first and only independent video game design program. I have a few students in the audience. I won't point them out, but they're in there somewhere. And I used to be a teacher at Dawson before I became the coordinator. I'm also the co-founder of the Montreal Independent Games Festival. My partner wasn't able to come here today, but it's Salim La Rochelle. He's indie game designer as well. We had our second iteration this year. The festival is growing really big. The first year we had about 900 attendees. This year we had about 2,000, and we're hoping to get even more. That's a picture from the first year. I didn't update my slides. And before Minority, I was a senior mission designer at Ubisoft Montreal. I worked on For Honor, that's about to ship very soon. And before that, I worked at GE Media making games for airplanes. These are a few of the licensed games we made, because if I show you the games that were not licensed, you wouldn't recognize them anyway. And before that, I spent the bulk of my career at Gameloft in Montreal, where I specialized as a narrative designer near the end, but initially I was a game designer for the longest time. These are some of the titles I worked on, but in the 7 years I was there, I shipped about 12 games. All in all, I've worked on and shipped about 25 games of different sizes. If you just count the ones that are like real games, but if you count the ones that I made with my kids, then you could extrapolate that. So basically, I make games, and I also make children. The two go hand in hand. And ever since I had kids, I knew I wanted to make games with my kids. I just didn't know how to start, and the thought that went behind it actually made me not do it, because it was like, are they gonna like it? Am I gonna turn them off? Are they too young for it? Is it too complicated? I want this to be an adventure that we go with together. Why make games with your kids? Well, there are a lot of reasons. So, making games is fun. I'm a very hands-on dad. The people who know me know that I love doing things with my kids. I'm always with them whenever possible. I just couldn't bring them today because I would have been late if I had to go home to pick them up to come here first. But otherwise, they would have been here. If I was attending this talk and not giving it, I would have been here with my kids. I love doing things with my kids. And making games with my kids is my kids' favorite activity ever. They actually prefer it than me taking them to the zoo. When I tell them, we're about to start making a game, yeah, they don't even hear me for the next 30 minutes. They're jumping up and down and doing other things that we'll get to. And of course, that wasn't the initial reaction. We developed that. We fostered that. You can teach a lot through game design. I'll go into the details a little bit later, but it's actually a tool. You can learn more about your kids. And I have a few examples, some funny ones as well. And, you know, there are a lot of things you never know. Maybe one day they could make a career out of it, right? Everyone wants their kids to follow in their footsteps, or I think everyone does. I'm not sure. Maybe other careers don't so much. So why else? Because other games we played were terrible. I'm specifically talking about games that were tailored for kids. Once the kids learn the rules, they don't want to go back. And frankly, I don't blame them. And board game night became bored night. So we decided, or I decided for them, that this is not going to stand. We're going to make our own fun games together. So we're going to hit two birds with one stone. And as I mentioned before, I didn't know how I was going to do this. And the answer came from my mother-in-law. So, funny story. My kids were super excited about going over to my mother-in-law's house because she promised them that they were going to make pizza and cupcakes. And of course, we don't allow our kids near the kitchen, except to eat because our dining room is connected. But otherwise, this is not a thing that they do at our home, right? Up until this point, which became part of our tradition as well. What I found really interesting is the way that my mother-in-law did it, which is the completely logical way. I just didn't dawn on me. The kids weren't actually making cupcakes. They were just throwing stuff on it. And then the cupcake was theirs. They took ownership of the cupcake based on the sprinkles and the chocolates that they put on top. And now that was a cupcake that they made. For the pizza, it was a little bit more complicated because they threw the toppings before it went into the oven. But they're not the ones who put it in the oven or the ones who took it out either. And they didn't prepare any of the dough or the cheese or anything. But to them, there was no difference. They came home and they didn't say, I threw things on this. They said, I made a cupcake. I made a pizza. Do you want to try it? And I said, no, because it looked disgusting. But still, the fact that they went through this and they came out with something, it was meaningful to them. They owned this. This was theirs. So I decided that's how we were going to make games together. So there's a little bit of a teaser. I'll go through a little bit of a process first. So again, this is just our journey and what we went through. This isn't a how-to guide. You might skip a few of the steps that I made that were mistakes. You might add a few depending on who your kids are, how old they are, etc. But I'm just sharing with you my experience. And one of the lessons learned was actually a lesson I had to unlearn, but I left it in there just to show you full transparency, and I'll refer to it when we get there. But the process that I went through wasn't perfect, but that was fine because it didn't have anyone to tell me how to do it to begin with, except my mother-in-law to start me off. So, how to get started? You analyze the situation. So who are your kids? How old are they? What do they know? What are they able to do? You know it better than anyone else, assuming you have kids. Again, if you have other people's kids, then maybe ask them. And be completely prepared, because the worst thing you could do for a kid is say, we're about to do this thing in 2 hours, and then you completely lose them. And they go on to something else and the excitement is gone. So be completely prepared before you start. Have all tools and assets ready. Being prepared is one thing. That's knowing what you have to do. And having everything ready is another thing. If you have to make a visit to the store, you've lost them. When you come back, they're going to be doing something else. And if it's the first game, have all the rules figured out. Like, you design the game. You make the dough. You have the pizza ready. You have everything ready. You don't go grocery shopping in between. That kills the hype, if you're thinking about it in pizza terms. So my challenge is, my kids now are older than this, but this is when I started off. I had 3 kids, one that was 3, the other that was 5, and one that was not even a year old. So of course we didn't start making games with her yet. So the situation I had, my son was 5, my daughter was 3. One can barely read, and the other can't at all. She recognizes that this is a letter, can't tell the difference between a number. So that's where we're at. And my son that was 5 years old had just started to learn to read. So he knows a few words, but barely knows any sentences. He couldn't put things together. The oldest gets bored easily, and the reason he gets bored easily is because if I have to dumb things down to a 3-year-old level, of course he's already, gone ahead of that. And that's normal, that's natural. And the youngest one gets confused easily if I bring things up to the 5-year-old's level. So that is a challenge that I had, where I had to make something that could engage both the 3-year-old and the 5-year-old at the same time. And if anyone who has kids, who deals with kids, you know that those 2 years are huge. Like, it's a huge difference between a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. It's way more than a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old. And the older you get, the less that difference makes, the less that age gap makes a difference. But at this age, it's all the difference in the world. So my goals: I wanted a game with no text, or rather, that text wasn't important to the game, that a person can recognize the letters, but they didn't need them. I wanted a game with meaningful decisions so that my son wouldn't get bored. If he just had to roll a thing and wait, he'd get bored too quickly. But I wanted no illegal actions, or actually barely any illegal actions, because I didn't want my daughter to be frustrated by not knowing what to do next. I wanted to give her one instruction, and for her to do that one instruction, and for it to work. It had to be 3 to 4 players because my wife occasionally played with us. Also, it's future-proof it for my youngest, and potential for strategy, so that once they learn the rules, it didn't become boring, and they will be able to actually have a little bit of thought go into it. So the first step was to make a card game. I'll tell you a little bit about the game that I designed. It's extremely simple, and I know everyone always says that, but this is actually extremely simple. The 3 stats that you see on the bottom, that's mind, magic, and meat. They always add up to 7. So every creature is either 7, 0, 0, 3, 4, 0. My math is, not working today. They always add up to, every combination is present. No combination is present more than once, and that amounts to 36 cards. So the entire game is 36 cards for the character cards. The picture is irrelevant. The name at the top you can completely ignore. It's only the stats that are important. Then there are 3 other categories of cards. The turn order, if it's going to the left or to the right, how many cards you have in your hand, and what is the stat that's more important now. The game is played extremely easily. You start with the first player. They play a card, regardless of which card. Everyone takes turns playing a card as well. You look at who has the highest stat of that, and then there's a tiebreaker, and then one after that. So it's impossible to get a draw since every combination of numbers are there. Someone's always going to win. The winner takes those cards and flips over one of the rules, and they decide which. So if they flip over the number of cards in your hand and it goes up to 5, everyone draws cards up to 5. If it drops down to 2, everyone discards down to 2. The cards that you take in your hand are your points. Whoever has the most points when the deck runs out wins. Extremely simple. So the 3-year-old plays it without looking at her hand. It's her turn to play. She has to put down a card. She puts down a card. She waits for us to tell her if she won. Either way, she's happy. We move on. My son initially would look at the card he had that had the value that matches this symbol. The highest card was put down, regardless of who played what first. And I saw him actually develop the skills to look and be like, well, this would be a wasted card now. I'm going to play this card instead. But that came with time. So I actually was able to teach him how to strategize. But initially, he had to learn the rules first. Already, I was really happy with it. And the best part is, all I had to do was tell them, go draw me pictures. That's how you're making a game. I need 36 creatures, go. And they loved it. Actually, to a fault, but I'll get to that in a sec. So these are some of the cards that we drew. This is one thing I learned about my son. The only goblin he knows is the Green Goblin. So when I told him, hey, how about you draw a goblin? This is what he came back with. And same thing happened with an ogre. The only ogre he knows is Shrek. And I realized, actually, and this is something that hit me as a parent. I didn't understand how limited the scope of their I don't know what you call it, their culture is, I guess, to a certain extent. Like they've only been alive a handful of years. So when you tell them to draw a thing, they probably have 1 or 2 references of that, and that's it. And I was super disappointed because some of the really important cultural things, I had no idea what it is. They did not know what a Cthulhu was. We had to Google it. To this day, my son thinks Zoidberg is a Cthulhu. Thank you, Google. And they were also able to create things. This is a giraffe pillar that my daughter drew. And this is a pizza monster. I was expecting pizza, by the way. I was hoping. The last meetup had pizza. Just saying. So, lesson 1, start them off with content creation. So you worry about the rules. Don't give them any options. You know what you have. You have all the material ready, and go. So we made a first version that was just on paper, printed out inside Magic the Gathering sleeves, that we were able to play right away. And then I surprised them when I went to the Game Crafter and printed out a real deck that they were able to play with their cousins, and it was a blast for them. They're like, we made a real game. Because it's not real if you photocopy it and print it, right? It's only real if it comes from a store or online in the mail. So that was an excellent experience and something I suggest. So high off the first success, and I did consider this a success, I decided to make a board game with them. And I forgot my own rules. So I asked my daughter, what did she want to make a board game about? Because I'm like, okay, this is how we're going to start. We're going to talk about what we want to do. So obviously, a 3-year-old in daycare, all they talk about are princesses. So she wanted to make a game about princesses. And my son wanted to make a game about the police. So I'm like, all right. And I started thinking about what could this game be, and they ran off starting drawing pictures of princesses and police. And having this is their initiation into the world of making games, is you go draw pictures, you come back, and dad magically has a game ready for you. So for a board game, obviously this doesn't work. And I forgot all the lessons, all the rules that I had written down, all the preparation, because when I got that initial success, I was like, oh, this is easy. I know how to do this now. And I rested on my laurels. So the game failed miserably. And the lesson I learned is don't mix 2 themes. This is the wrong lesson. I learned the wrong lessons. You can't mix any themes. The problem was, the real lesson was that I wasn't prepared. I forgot my own rule. I didn't know what game I was going to make. I didn't direct them towards the rules that I had already planned out. I was planning to do all of that on the spot. I forgot about all the prep work that I did before. Failure. But this is the lesson that I learned at the time. This is what I thought was a real lesson. So I decided, okay, since mixing two themes doesn't work, I'm going to make two different board games, one for each child. So my son made City Game I Love This, which he named himself. It was a simple variation on Snakes and Ladders, except when you fall on a square, you draw an action card, and then you could choose to either play that action card or pass it to the next person who has to play it. So there are good action cards, bad action cards, and choice. And sometimes you didn't want to do the action, and sometimes you did. So it was a very simple concept. I came up with the rules beforehand. It was a very simple rule set because I had to fit their expectations. It's roll a die, move here, you get a card. The card only had symbols on it. It didn't have any words, so it was easy to understand. Arrow forward, arrow back to a different color. And then you either give it to someone or keep it. It's very simple. My daughter designed 05Q7654321 plus, which was exactly my son's game. Because the rules were exactly the same, and sitting next to her big brother, she didn't have the courage to try something different, so she would copy exactly what he did, which is natural for a 3-year-old. If she's like, what do I do now? She's gonna look over to see what her older brother is doing and copy it. She almost color matched the board. Almost. I had to tell her, you don't have to go that far. And of course, she named her board game herself. So I didn't consider this a success. I thought the lesson was encourage originality. Don't let them do this. Don't let them copy off each other. So I decided to make two different board games, and the approach was a little bit different. The approach was ask them what theme they wanted the day before, and then plan it out, but present it that way. Don't say, we're gonna make a game. Ask them, what kind of theme would you like for a game? Just in conversation, and then come up with the rules, and then after that, write down the rules, and then the next day help them actually build it. So my daughter wanted a restaurant game. Simple enough. So I came up with easy rules for that. Customers come in, you send them to the right table, there are die that counts down, then they're satisfied, they leave. There are failed conditions, win conditions, but it's extremely simple. You just decide where they go, and then every turn the die count down, and you either succeeded or you didn't. Very simple. My son decided he wanted a firefighter game. So it was a variation on his city game, fire come up, which is red die. It counts down. If it counts down all the way and you never sent a firefighter there, then the house burns down. If too many houses burn down, you fail. If you save a lot of houses, you win. And it's a cooperative game that scales up depending on how many how many players are there. It was, in my humble opinion, I thought they were pretty decent games. The issue I had was my daughter wanted a tea party. She didn't want to follow the rules. So I adapted to her. I'm like, she's a 3-year-old. She has the right to make modifications. So she got rid of the fail condition. So basically what she had are her dolls coming onto a table, having a conversation, and then carrying on. The issue with that, I had no issue with that. She was having fun until the cousins came over and nobody wanted to play her board game. Everyone wanted to play my son's, and I didn't foresee this, and she was sad. So I had to be the one who played Tea Party with her for 2 hours. So that was a fail for obvious reasons. I mean, I do enough of that without bringing board games into it. So enforce the rules. I mean, gently, but you're parents, so you already know how to do that. But enforce the rules. Come up with the rules and don't let them bend it too much. They're there for a reason. Your rules, of course, not necessarily mine. So it dawned on me at that point that, wait, the last two board games, even though I considered them failures or successes, it wasn't because of the mixing of the two themes. So I must have made a mistake before. I want to revisit that. Let's try a board game with two themes. So I did the same thing, except this time I reversed it. I came up with a mechanic first, and then I asked them what themes they wanted, and I massaged the themes to work. So basically the way I asked the question, it kind of guided them to choose themes that would fit. So the concept that I came up with, it's a cooperative board game where you want to reach a point, and there's something else that wants to reach there first. It's kind of a race. So I presented it that way and asked them each to pick a character. One to pick the good guys and one to pick the bad guys. So we came up with robots versus pets. So my son wanted robots, my daughter wanted pets, and the story was very simple. There are humans at the end, the robots want to destroy them, the pets are gonna go save them. So you roll a die, all the robots move one tile. And then if you fall on a blue tile, you pick up a blue action card. I'm gonna show you some cards in a sec. If you fall on pick one, you pick up a pink action card, and then you get to decide whether to use that or not use it, or who to use it on. And everything's with symbols, there are no text, so it's not hard to understand. So it's another variation on the Snakes and Ladders. Actually, that's the easiest approach, is to take an existing card game and just to massage it a bit and improve it, because really the the board games that are available for kids are not that great. These are some of the cards that we had. Man's best friend. So if you get this card and you use it, you can move a pet, any pet, and since it's a co-op game, it's first person to win, everyone wins, so you want to help out other people. You could move any pet to the next pink square. So my daughter would always move her pet. If she was on a pink square, she didn't care, she was moving. And if my son eventually started to learn, okay, this would be a better move because it was 5. And then by seeing him do that, my daughter actually picked that up. She's like, oh, okay, he actually made a decision at this point, which was great. She was feeding off his strategy. The next card was, oh, I went too far. Forget that one, you didn't see it yet. Robot haircut. So you take a robot and you send him back to the last blue square. Actually, there are kids here. You might want to avert their eyes for the next slide. Or maybe not. But the next slide is Robo-Rocket. And it gave me a little bit of a heart attack. But in the eyes of kids, it's just a rocket. Yeah. All right, so it's a rocket. It's nothing else but a rocket. But I wanted to not include this for a while, but then I decided, whatever. Kids, they play with their cousins. Nobody else noticed. But every time an adult saw this, they're like, what the hell is this? It's just a rocket. It's nothing else. So lesson 5 was take time to brainstorm. The issue wasn't merging 2 themes. You can merge any 2 themes. You just have to find creative ways to do so. So either come up with the game rules first and then bring them to get themes that fit into that, or let them come up with the themes, give it time, and then create a design that could do that. They'll take ownership. They love robots, they love pets, and this is their game, and it's called Robots vs. Pets. There's no better board game that you could buy out there than a game that they decide what's in it. I mean, there just isn't. So the 6th step was to make a video game. Disclaimer, did not use Unity, but there were reasons for that. The plan is eventually to make a game with Unity, but at the time I was more comfortable making quick games with GameMaker, so I did it with GameMaker, and then eventually, actually, I discovered Construct 2, and I was able to let my kids make games through Construct 2, and that was even better. But this is the game that we came up with. My partner actually is working on a game called The Girl and the Robot, and I guess that was fresh on their minds, I don't know, but this is what they wanted to recreate. The game was very simple. I wanted a platformer. There were enemies, bad guys, but I let my kids decide what, because for making a game, the process is longer. So we did it over installments. So I said, today, we're going to design the main characters only. So they went out and they drew the main characters, then they came back with a robot, and my daughter drew herself, a girl. So then I asked them, excuse me, what mechanics that they wanted. My son wanted his robot to shoot lasers from his eyes. And my daughter wanted to have flowers. And I asked her, what do the flowers do? She said, they put the robots to sleep. Because the bad guys are also robots, because my son insisted that there were bad guys that were robots as well. So the flowers put the robots to sleep. I said, perfect. So I let my son vaporize the enemies, and I let my daughter put them to sleep. And the craziest thing ended up happening. Oh wait, there's one more variable that I forgot. I asked them who wanted to be the fast character and who wanted to be the character that jumps high. So my son said, jump high. And my daughter said, what's left? So she was the fast character. And what ended up happening was the game changed completely. It was supposed to be, it loads random characters, you destroy them, it counts up the score of who destroyed the most, and you win. But my daughter was rushing to the characters to put them to sleep before my son could kill them. She was saving the bad guy robots. And this was completely inadvertent. It wasn't part of the plan at all, but it just came out of who they are as people, as kids, because kids are people too, and what they wanted to do with the game. So this was our game, The Girl and the Robot. So lesson number 7 is just have fun with it. I mean, the whole exercise is for you to teach and to learn from your kids. Learning, everyone knows that learning is fun, teaching is fun, right? Kids, learning is fun. It's a lesson that you should learn. So have fun with it. Adapt it. Find your own style. Take whatever is good from this, throw away whatever is bad, skip a few steps, add some more, and then send me a tweet to let me know about it, because I'd love to know what you did so I could try to incorporate it. And that's it. Thank you. Briefly, questions? Yeah. Okay, so briefly, because I believe Fred's presentation is like 3 times longer than mine. We don't want to take up all the time. Anyone? Don't be shy. Yes?
How did you become a better game designer by working with kids?
That's a very good question. I mean, I've been making games with my kids. Oh, repeat the question. Did I become a better game designer? Well, I mean, the process of making games with my kid took years. So throughout those years, yes, I did become a better game designer. At least I hope so. Otherwise, I wasted a few years. Yes, I actually learned a lot. I learned a lot about making games specifically for a younger audience, but also targeted audience to start putting yourself in the place of who you're making games for. Some of them are subconscious, but a few things are actually, I took home some concrete. No, you have to think about exactly who they are, what their background information is, what their what kind of references that they're subjected to, etc. So those are some hard lessons. Yes, sir.
Do your kids play video games outside?
Well, at the time we started doing this, they had very little contact with video games. Now they play a lot of video games, but they prefer not. Like it's funny because compared to their cousins who don't have a lot of video games as part of their home culture, my kids games are like the fallback. You know, they'd rather do almost anything else. But if there's nothing, okay, I guess we'll play a game. While my nephews, especially, and my nieces as well, but mostly my nephews, they will never choose anything over games. It's just because they have a very limited, I guess, access to them to a certain extent. So I think that plays a part in it. But I actually purposely limited their access to games initially at one point until I realized that I could control it, and because too much of anything is not good, and too little of anything might also be not good. I don't know about games. Too little games, I'm not sure if they're not good. But I mean, we play games together often. There are a few games that they could play alone, but then we discourage them to play for too long. But if they're in that situation, we see it as a failure on us for not giving them alternatives. So we give them other alternatives, and they always take them. So.
And do you find that they're influenced by the games they play either alone or with you in the games they make better?
Very interesting. Okay, so are they should I repeat the first question?
You did it already.
All right. Okay, so wait, what was the question? Are they influenced? Definitely. Actually, I had way more games that we made together than this, because we're talking about several years now. My son is 8 now, so it's been 3 years since we started making games together. I didn't show all the games. We made a Minecraft card game because my son was super into Minecraft. I didn't show it. I didn't see a reason to, because it was pretty much a reskin of the card game that I made before. But they often want to, they have a thing that they love in their life, and they want to have some kind of a fan art of it. And that's natural. And I didn't exactly encourage it, but I don't discourage it either. But I try to make them come up with their own themes and ideas as much as possible. But yeah, that was probably the most concrete influence from a game that they played, was the Minecraft card game that we made. Anyone else? Oh, we used the pixel art from the game for the icons on the bottom, the magic and meat. No? Going once, going twice? Oh, yes, go ahead. Oh, that wasn't a question. You got me all excited. All right, so I guess it's a good note to wrap up on. Thank you very much.